Billionaire is snubbed in meeting, but the nanny defends him with surprising talent. Richard Thompson took a deep breath as he tried to maintain his composure before the executives circling him like vultures. At 62, the founder of California's largest construction company felt the weight of every cruel word echoing through the boardroom. That's when he felt a gentle touch on his shoulder. Turning around, he saw Jennifer Parker, the nanny to his granddaughter Emma, watching everything with determined eyes. "Mr. Richard, are you okay?" she whispered, adjusting 3-year-old Emma in her arms. The executives paused for a moment, surprised by the interruption. Jeffrey Wilson, the company's top executive, shot a disdainful look at the 28-year-old. "What's a nanny doing here?" Jeffrey mocked. "This is a business meeting, not a nursery." Richard felt his blood boil, but before he could respond, Jennifer stepped forward. "I apologize for interrupting, but I couldn't stand by and watch someone I respect be treated this way." The executives burst into laughter. Barbara Rogers, the CFO, shook her head dismissively. "How adorable. The nanny wants to defend her boss. Maybe you should take the child somewhere else and let the adults work." Emma started crying at the raised voices. Richard slowly stood up, his legs trembling with nerves and suppressed anger. For the past 3 months, ever since his wife Catherine had passed due to heart complications, he hadn't been able to think clearly. The executives were exploiting his vulnerability to challenge his every decision. "Jennifer, please take Emma to my office," Richard said wearily. "With all due respect, Mr. Richard, I think Miss Emma should stay. She could learn about business early," Jennifer replied, surprising everyone. Jeffrey slammed his hand on the table. "Enough! Who do you think you are, giving opinions on this company's business? You're just a hired nanny." "You're right, I am a nanny," Jennifer said calmly, gently rocking Emma to soothe her. "But I also have a degree in business administration from the University of California, with a specialization in financial management." Silence fell over the room. The executives exchanged glances, some skeptical, others growing uneasy. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now continuing. "That's ridiculous," Jeffrey said, trying to stay composed. "Even if it's true, you have no real-world experience. You don't know the actual challenges of the market." "I worked 5 years at Anderson & Partners Construction before deciding to focus on childcare," Jennifer continued, her voice steady and calm. "I was responsible for feasibility analysis on highly complex projects." Richard watched her with growing admiration. In 6 months of caring for Emma, Jennifer had proven herself dedicated, warm, and incredibly sharp. But she'd never mentioned her academic or professional background. Amanda Collins, the HR director, tried to regain control. "Even so, miss..." She paused, realizing she didn't know Jennifer's last name. "Parker." "Jennifer Parker," she replied politely. "Miss Parker, this meeting is about strategic company matters, things you don't understand." Jennifer smiled gently as Emma played with the badge she always wore. "You're discussing Mr. Richards' proposal to expand into affordable housing, correct? He suggested an initial investment of $50 million to build a residential complex in Riverside." The executives were stunned. That information had been shared just moments before Jennifer entered the room. "How do you know that?" asked Jeffrey, his voice beginning to show nervousness. "I listen, I observe. And I care about what happens in this company and with this family," replied Jennifer, looking directly at Richard. The businessman felt a strange emotion in his chest. For months, no one had shown genuine interest in his well-being or the direction of the company. Everyone seemed to be waiting for the right moment to make decisions without consulting him. "Mr. Richard," Jennifer continued, "may I have 5 minutes to discuss this proposal?" Richard nodded slowly, curious to see where this would lead. Jeffrey shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation's direction. "This is a waste of time," he muttered. "On the contrary," said Jennifer, stepping closer to the presentation displayed on the screen. "You're only seeing the surface numbers. You haven't analyzed the social and economic context that makes this project not just viable, but necessary." She pointed to the graphs on the screen, still holding Emma with one arm. "The housing deficit in California is approximately 400,000 units. Riverside has a specific demand of 15,000 families that qualify for the state government's housing program. The land Mr. Richard identified is located near the new public transportation corridor set to open next year. The executives began to pay attention, some taking notes. Richard felt his heart race, not from nervousness, but renewed hope. Furthermore, Jennifer continued, the construction cost per square foot in Riverside is 17% lower than in San Diego, thanks to municipal tax incentives that will be in effect for the next 3 years. Barbara Rogers, who had mocked Jennifer minutes earlier, now watched her intently. "Where did you get this information?" she asked. "Research, something you should have done before dismissing Mr. Richards' proposal without proper analysis," Jennifer replied, her tone still respectful but firm. Jeffrey tried to interrupt, but Richard raised his hand, calling for silence. "Go on, Jennifer." The return on investment would be approximately 22% annually, considering the scheduled sale of the units. That's not including the building maintenance contracts, which would generate additional revenue for the next 10 years. Emma babbled something, and Jennifer smiled at her before continuing. But the most important thing is that this project would position Thompson Construction as a leader in social responsibility, opening doors for partnerships with the state and federal governments on future projects. Richard felt tears forming in his eyes, not from sadness, but pride and gratitude. Someone had truly understood his vision, had looked beyond the numbers to see the project's true potential. "These are just speculations," said Jeffrey, but his voice no longer carried the same conviction. "No, these are concrete figures based on market research and trend analysis," Jennifer countered. "I can share the sources if you'd like to verify." She turned to the laptop connected to the projector and with one free hand opened a folder of files. "How do you have access to the company's system?" asked Amanda, alarmed. "Mr. Richard gave me access 2 weeks ago so I could better organize his schedule and appointments related to Emma," Jennifer explained. Richard confirmed with a nod. He had trusted Jennifer to help him balance his responsibilities as a grandfather and a businessman. "In the past few weeks, while taking care of Emma, I used my free time to study the company's projects. I wanted to better understand Mr. Richards' work and perhaps find ways to help." The screen displayed a detailed spreadsheet with financial projections, risk analyses, and implementation timelines. "You rejected the proposal based solely on the initial investment amount," said Jennifer. "But you didn't consider the positive cash flow it would generate starting from the 6th month, nor the added value to the company's brand." Jeffrey was visibly uncomfortable. He had led the opposition to Richard's project, claiming it was too risky and poorly planned. "Even if these numbers are correct," he said, trying to regain control, "we have no guarantees the market will respond as expected." "You're right to be cautious," Jennifer agreed. "That's why I suggest a phased implementation. Start with 200 units to test market reception before expanding to the full project." Richard stood up from his chair, his legs now steady. Confidence was returning. "Why didn't you ever tell me about your background and experience?" he asked Jennifer. "Because I didn't think it was relevant to taking care of Emma," she answered honestly. "And because I noticed you were going through a tough time. I didn't want to add more pressure by suggesting business changes." "But you've been observing and analyzing all this time," Richard said, more as a statement than a question. "Yes, I care about this family, about you and Emma. I wanted to make sure I was doing everything I could to help." Barbara walked over to the laptop and began examining the data more closely. "These numbers, they're correct," she murmured, clearly impressed. "Of course they are," said Jennifer. "I wouldn't present incorrect information." Jeffrey abruptly stood up from his chair. "This is ridiculous. Are we seriously taking advice from a nanny? She may have degrees, but she has no real experience with the challenges we face." "What challenges?" Jennifer asked, her tone still calm. "You all seem more concerned with maintaining the status quo than growing the company." "How dare you question our competence?" Jeffrey shouted. Emma began crying again at the raised voices. Jennifer gently soothed her as she addressed Jeffrey. "I'm not questioning anyone's competence. I'm just presenting an objective analysis of a business opportunity you rejected without proper study." Richard watched the discussion with growing admiration for Jennifer. She kept her composure under pressure, protected Emma, and still managed to articulate solid arguments. "Jeffrey," said Richard, his voice regaining the authority of past years, "I want to hear your detailed analysis on why you rejected my proposal." Jeffrey hesitated. The truth was, he had dismissed the project without thorough analysis, relying only on his influence over the other executives to validate his decision. "Well, the risks are obvious. The affordable housing market is unstable." "Based on what data?" Jennifer interrupted politely. "Based on market experience," Jeffrey stammered. "Which specific experience?" she pressed. "Because according to the data I analyzed, the affordable housing market in California has grown consistently over the past 5 years." Amanda began internally questioning the decisions she'd supported out of loyalty to Jeffrey. Michael William, the project director, who had remained quiet throughout the meeting, finally spoke up. "Jennifer's right," he said. "I also had doubts about the project, but after seeing this analysis, I realized we didn't do our homework." Jeffrey shot a furious glance at Michael. "You're letting yourself be influenced by a superficial presentation." "Superficial?" said Jennifer, her voice still controlled. "Mr. Jeffrey, may I ask, when was the last time you personally visited a housing development to understand the real needs of future residents?" Jeffrey fell silent. The answer was that he had never done so. "I visited 3 similar complexes in the metropolitan area over the last 2 weeks, Jennifer continued. "I spoke with residents, property managers, and local government representatives. This analysis isn't just based on numbers, but on market reality." Richard felt a growing emotion in his chest. Someone had dedicated real time and effort to understand his vision and improve it. "You did this in your free time?" he asked. "On weekends, while Emma was napping," Jennifer replied with a smile. "I took her a few times to see the playgrounds at the complexes. She loved it. Emma, as if understanding she was being mentioned, clapped her hands and smiled at her grandfather." That's extraordinary dedication," murmured Richard, clearly moved. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out." Now, continuing. Barbara, who had finished reviewing the data, looked up from her laptop. "Richard, this analysis is more thorough than anything we've produced here in the last 2 years." "Thank you," Jennifer said simply. "That wasn't a compliment," Barbara said, though without malice. "It's an acknowledgement that we've failed as a team." Jeffrey realized he was losing control of the situation. "You're all being fooled by a well-crafted presentation. Anyone can manipulate numbers to look convincing." "Then prove the numbers are wrong," Jennifer challenged. "I don't have to prove anything to a nanny." The word nanny left Jeffrey's mouth dripping with all the prejudice he felt. Richard slowly stood, his imposing height dominating the room. "Jeffrey, you've just demonstrated exactly the kind of attitude that's destroying this company," Richard said, his voice deep and firm. "Richard, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. Jennifer has shown more dedication and competence in 20 minutes than you have in 6 months. Jeffrey turned pale. He had completely underestimated the situation. "Jennifer," Richard continued, "would you be willing to take on an executive role in this company?" The question stunned everyone, including Jennifer herself. She glanced at Emma, who was quietly playing with her badge, then back at Richard. "Mr. Thompson, I deeply appreciate your trust, but my priority is taking care of Emma. She needs stability and love, especially after the loss you've suffered." The indirect mention of Catherine's absence brought a wave of emotion over Richard. Jennifer had touched the core of his inner struggle, how to balance his responsibilities as a businessman and as a grandfather. "But," Jennifer continued, "maybe we can find a way for me to contribute without compromising my main role." "What do you have in mind?" Richard asked. "I can continue as Emma's nanny and, during her preschool hours or nap times, work as an in-house consultant. Review projects, conduct market research, assist with strategic decisions." The proposal was clever and practical. Richard felt a wave of relief, realizing he wouldn't have to choose between having Jennifer care for Emma or bringing her expertise to the business. "This is unacceptable," Jeffrey snapped. "A nanny can't have privileged access to company information." "Why not?" asked Michael William. "If she has the skills to add value, what's the problem?" "The problem is hierarchy, it's experience, it's prejudice," Jennifer Parker calmly concluded. "You're rejecting an idea not on its merits, but because it comes from someone you consider beneath you." Jeffrey Wilson turned red with anger. "I won't stand being disrespected by a—" "Careful with your next words," Richard Thompson interrupted, his voice laced with warning. A tense silence filled the room. Emma, sensing the tension, reached out her little arms toward her grandfather. Richard carefully picked her up, and the child immediately relaxed in his arms. "Do you know what impresses me most about this whole situation?" Richard said, gently rocking Emma. "Jennifer conducted this entire analysis while taking care of a 3-year-old. She managed to be both an exemplary nanny and a business consultant at the same time. That shows a level of organization and dedication I rarely see in the corporate world." Amanda Collins nodded in agreement. "It's true. Over the past few months, Emma has never seemed neglected. On the contrary, she's visibly happier and more developed. And Jennifer always submitted timely reports on Emma's activities, feeding schedules and developmental progress," Richard added. "If she applies the same meticulousness to business, it's clear she does," Barbara Rogers said, pointing to the screen. "This analysis has a level of detail our team hasn't produced in recent projects." Jeffrey realized he was losing his colleagues' support entirely. His strategy of intimidation and authority wasn't working. "Even if you accept this irregular situation," he said, making one last attempt, "you can't ignore the fact that I've led the executive team for 5 years. My decisions have always been accepted." "Your decisions were accepted because I trusted you," Richard said, "but now I see that trust may have been misplaced." "What are you suggesting?" Jeffrey asked, his voice beginning to betray desperation. "I'm suggesting it might be time to reevaluate how this company makes decisions," Richard replied. Jennifer, who had remained quiet during the exchange, stepped closer to the laptop again. "Can I show you one more thing?" she asked. Richard nodded, curious. "While researching the housing project, I found some inconsistencies in the financial reports from the last 6 months." Jeffrey froze. Barbara moved closer, intrigued. "What kind of inconsistencies?" she asked. "Discrepancies between the amounts approved for construction materials and the amounts actually spent. Differences totaling approximately $300,000. The silence in the room was deafening. Jeffrey tried to maintain his composure, but sweat began to bead on his forehead. "That must be some accounting error," he muttered. "I thought so too," Jennifer said. "That's why I compared them with the supplier's invoices. The amounts are correct on the invoices, but incorrect in the internal reports." Barbara paled. As the financial director, she was responsible for overseeing those reports. "How did you get access to the supplier's invoices?" she asked. "Mr. Thompson gave me access to the company files to help with administrative tasks. The invoices were digitally archived in the system." Richard felt a surge of anger rising. If there were financial irregularities in his company, he needed to know immediately. "Jennifer, can you be more specific about these discrepancies?" "Of course. Commercial building project in the northern zone. Approved materials for $200,000, actual spending of $140,000. $60,000 difference unexplained. Residential project in Pasadena. Approved materials for $120,000, actual spending of $80,000. $40,000 difference." She continued listing other examples. With each number, Jeffrey grew paler. "And where do you think those amounts went?" asked Richard, his voice controlled but dangerous. "I don't know exactly, but I do know someone with the authority to approve budgets was involved in these transactions." All eyes turned to Jeffrey. As the top executive, he had the authority to approve budgets and oversee expenses. "These are serious accusations," he said, trying to sound indignant. "I demand a full audit before any rash conclusions are drawn." "Great idea," Richard said immediately. "We'll hire an external auditing firm this very week." Jeffrey realized he had dug his own grave. An external audit would reveal not only the discrepancies Jennifer had uncovered, but other irregularities he had committed over the years. Richard, maybe this isn't necessary. We can handle it internally. I know, Jeffrey. If there are suspicions of wrongdoing, we need a full and impartial investigation. Jennifer watched the exchange while gently rocking Emma, who had fallen asleep in her arms. She had called this meeting just to defend Richard from the humiliation he was enduring. She hadn't expected to uncover potential financial issues in the company. "Mr. Richard," she said softly, "may I suggest we consult the legal department before making any final decisions?" "Excellent idea," Richard agreed. "Amanda, contact our lawyers today." Amanda nodded, jotting notes in her planner. "Jeffrey," Richard continued, "you're suspended from your duties while the investigation is ongoing." "You can't do this," Jeffrey protested. "I have rights, I have a contract." "And you'll have every right to defend yourself," Richard said calmly. "But while there are suspicions about your conduct, you can't continue having access to company resources." Jeffrey looked around the room, searching for support from his colleagues, but everyone avoided his gaze. Barbara was clearly worried about her own responsibilities as CFO. Michael seemed relieved to finally see irregularities being investigated. Amanda took notes, focused on following proper procedures. "This is unfair," Jeffrey muttered. "All this started when that nanny showed up here with her ideas and accusations." "No," Richard corrected firmly. "This started when you and other executives decided I was senile and unfit to lead my own company. This started when you stopped respecting me and began making decisions without consulting me." The truth of Richard's words struck everyone in the room. Over the past few months, after Catherine's departure, the executives had indeed taken increasing control over company decisions, gradually sidelining the founder. "Jennifer," Richard said, turning to her, "simply showed what an honest and competent analysis can reveal, both about business opportunities and internal problems." Emma stirred in Jennifer's arms, murmuring something unintelligible in her sleep. The moment brought a sense of calm to the tense room. "Mr. Richard," Jennifer said gently, "perhaps it's best we continue this discussion tomorrow. Emma needs her lunchtime and nap." Richard looked at his sleeping granddaughter and felt a wave of tenderness. Jennifer was right. No matter how important the company's problems were, Emma's needs came first. "You're right," he said. "Let's adjourn for today. Amanda, schedule another meeting for tomorrow morning. Jeffrey, you'll receive instructions from legal about next steps." Jeffrey stood from his chair without a word. As he passed Jennifer, he muttered something only she could hear. "You have no idea what you've gotten into." Jennifer looked him straight in the eye and replied calmly, "I've gotten into doing what's right, and I'm not afraid of the consequences." After the executives left, Richard and Jennifer were alone in the meeting room with Emma still asleep. "Jennifer," said Richard, his voice heavy with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you for what you did today." "No need to thank me," she replied. "I just did what any decent person would do when they see someone being wronged." "No, it was much more than that. You showed dedication, intelligence, and courage, qualities I thought I'd lost in this company." Richard walked to the window overlooking the city. Below, the bustle of San Diego continued as usual, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded in that room. "You know, Jennifer, after Catherine left, I started questioning whether I still had the energy to lead this company, whether I still had the judgment needed to make important decisions." "And now?" she asked softly. "Now I feel like maybe I've surrounded myself with the wrong people, and that with the right ones I can still make a difference." Emma opened her eyes and smiled at her grandfather. Richard picked her up, feeling her small weight as a reminder of the responsibilities that truly mattered. "Jennifer, will you accept my offer to continue as Emma's nanny and help me as a consultant?" "I accept," she answered without hesitation, "but on one condition." "What?" "That you promise not to let yourself be intimidated by outside pressures. This company needs your leadership, and Emma needs a confident, fulfilled grandfather." Richard smiled, the first genuine smile he'd given in months. "I promise." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the days that followed, the dynamic at Thompson Construction changed drastically. Richard gradually regained control of operations, while Jennifer split her time between caring for Emma and analyzing the company's projects. The external audit was hired and began its work immediately. The preliminary results confirmed Jennifer's suspicions. Jeffrey had embezzled approximately $1,200,000 over 3 years, using a sophisticated scheme involving inflated material costs and supplier kickbacks. "How did you manage to spot this when our own internal auditors missed it?" Barbara asked Jennifer during a follow-up meeting. "Because I wasn't looking to confirm anything," Jennifer replied. "I was just trying to understand how the company worked. When you look without bias, sometimes you find things others didn't see." The discovery of the financial irregularities led to a complete overhaul of the company's executive structure. Barbara remained as CFO after an investigation cleared her of direct involvement in the embezzlement, but new controls were implemented. Michael William was promoted to COO, and Amanda took on greater responsibility in HR. The Riverside Housing Project was unanimously approved by the new executive board and moved into implementation. Jennifer suggested creating a social support program for the beneficiary families, turning the project into a model of corporate social responsibility. 3 months after that memorable meeting, Richard was in his office reviewing the project's progress reports when Jennifer walked in with Emma, who had just woken from her afternoon nap. "How are the numbers?" she asked, settling Emma on her lap. "Better than your most optimistic projections," Richard replied with a smile. "Demand for the units has exceeded our expectations by 40%. "That's wonderful," Jennifer said, genuinely happy. "And how are you feeling?" Richard set the papers aside and reflected on the question. In recent months, he had rediscovered the joy of leading the company, the satisfaction of making strategic decisions, and most of all, the happiness of spending quality time with Emma. "I feel like I've become myself again," he said honestly. "Not just the businessman I was before, but a better version, wiser, more cautious, but also more determined." Emma babbled something and stretched her little arms toward her grandfather. Richard picked her up, and she immediately began playing with his tie. "And what about you, Jennifer? How are you feeling with this new routine?" "Fulfilled," she answered without hesitation. "Taking care of Emma is still my priority, but being able to contribute to the family business gives me a sense of purpose I didn't realize was missing." Richard watched Jennifer interacting with Emma. Over the past few months, he had noticed subtle but important changes in their family dynamic. Emma had become more talkative, more curious, more confident, and he himself was more present, more involved in his granddaughter's upbringing. "Jennifer, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "Why did you decide to work as a nanny after having a promising career in administration?" Jennifer smiled, but Richard noticed a shadow pass over her eyes. "It's a long story," she said. "We have time," Richard encouraged. Jennifer adjusted Emma in her lap and took a deep breath. "I worked at Anderson & Partners Construction, as I mentioned. I was a senior project analyst, had an excellent salary, and clear growth prospects. I was dating another executive at the company, David. Richard could already tell this story wouldn't have a happy ending. One day, I discovered irregularities in a project David was leading. Nothing criminal, but questionable practices that could harm the buyers of the units. When I brought it to the board, David denied everything and said I was trying to sabotage him out of professional jealousy. And what happened? The company chose to believe him. I was fired for uncooperative behavior and David got promoted. I later found out they had been in a relationship for months." Richard felt anger at the injustice Jennifer had endured. "Was that when you decided to change careers?" "Not right away. I tried to find another job in the field, but David had spread rumors about my emotional instability and difficulty working in a team. No company wanted to hire me." Emma, as if sensing the sadness in Jennifer's voice, snuggled closer to her. "So I started working as a nanny to pay the bills while figuring out what to do next, and I discovered I loved taking care of children. They're honest, straightforward. They don't play political games. With them, you're judged only by your care and dedication. But you never lost your professional skills, Richard observed. No, I kept studying, staying updated. I always thought I might return to the corporate world someday if the right opportunity came along. And now? Now I feel like I've found the best of both worlds. I can use my professional skills to help a family I respect while doing work I truly love. Richard fell silent for a moment, processing Jennifer's story. He now understood why she had been so sensitive to recognizing when he was being wronged. She had gone through something similar herself. Jennifer, have you ever thought about suing your former employer? I did, but I decided it wasn't worth it. Suing them wouldn't change what happened, and I didn't want to stay stuck in the past. But it might have stopped them from doing the same thing to others. Jennifer considered Richard's words. Maybe, but I'd rather focus on building something positive than tearing down something negative. Her answer showed a maturity and wisdom that impressed Richard. Jennifer had turned a traumatic experience into motivation to help others. You know your story inspires me, right? He said. How so? You could have become bitter, distrustful, resentful. Instead, you chose to be compassionate, fair, and dedicated. That's admirable. Emma began to grow restless, signaling she was hungry. Jennifer got up to fetch the bottle. Mr. Richard, may I suggest something? Of course. How about we have lunch together today? You, me, and Emma. No work talk, just as family. The word family struck Richard deeply. Since Catherine's passing, he had felt isolated, as if the family had lost its cohesion. But Jennifer was right. They had become a family, even if not a traditional one. I'd love that, he replied. During lunch at a restaurant near the company, Richard watched the interaction between Jennifer and Emma. There was a naturalness, a genuine love that went beyond any professional relationship. Emma responded to Jennifer as she would to a mother, with complete trust and affection. Jennifer, Richard said when Emma was distracted playing with a toy, can I confess something? Go ahead. In the first few months after Catherine left, I felt lost with Emma. I didn't know how to care for a small child, how to be both a grandfather and a father at the same time. It's natural to feel that way, Jennifer said understandingly. But you didn't just take care of her. You taught me how to care for her. You taught me how to be a better grandfather. Jennifer smiled, touched by his words. Emma is a special child. It's easy to love her. Yes, but it wasn't easy for me to express that love before. You showed me how. Emma, as if she knew she was being praised, smiled at them and clapped her hands. Grandpa, she said clearly, one of the few words she could already pronounce. Richard felt tears welling up in his eyes. Over the past few months, Emma had started calling him Grandpa consistently, something she hadn't done before Jennifer arrived. She's growing up so fast, he murmured. And you're growing right along with her, Jennifer observed. How so? You're learning to balance professional and family responsibilities. You're becoming more patient, more attentive to the details that truly matter. Emma is teaching you just as much as you're teaching her. Richard reflected on Jennifer's words. It was true. Caring for Emma had forced him to reorganize his priorities, to cherish simple moments, to find joy in small victories. Catherine would be proud, he said, more to himself than to Jennifer. I'm sure she would, Jennifer agreed. You're honoring her memory by being the best grandfather you can be. The rest of lunch passed in a relaxed mood. Emma enjoyed watching the restaurant's activity, and Richard surprised himself by genuinely laughing at her little antics. On the way back to the company, Jennifer casually mentioned, "Oh, Mr. Richard, I forgot to mention I got a job offer yesterday." Richard's heart raced. An offer? Yes. A construction company in New York offered me a project director position. Very good salary, excellent benefits. Richard tried to stay composed, but the thought of losing Jennifer terrified him. And are you considering it? Jennifer looked at Emma, sleeping peacefully in her stroller, then at Richard. No, she said simply. I already turned it down. Richard's relief was palpable. May I ask why? Because here, I've found something money can't buy. A family that values me, work that has meaning, and the chance to make a difference in the lives of people who truly matter to me. Richard stopped walking and looked directly at Jennifer. "You know you can stay here as long as you want, right? And that you'll always have our respect and gratitude." "I know. That's exactly why I plan to stay." They continued walking in comfortable silence. Richard felt an inner peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. His company was thriving, Emma was happy and well cared for, and he had found in Jennifer not just an exceptional employee, but a true partner and friend. When they arrived at the office, they were greeted by Amanda with excellent news. The Riverside project had been selected by the state government as a model to be replicated in other cities. Thompson Construction would be contracted to develop similar projects in at least 5 municipalities over the next 2 years. "This means contracts worth over $200 million, announced Amanda, clearly excited. Richard looked at Jennifer, who smiled modestly. "Congratulations," she said. "Your original vision has become reality." "Our vision," Richard corrected. "Without your analysis and refinements, the project would never have reached this point." That evening, Richard was at home reflecting on the events of the past few months when his phone rang. It was Barbara. "Richard, sorry to bother you at home, but I needed to tell you something important." "What happened?" "Jeffrey reached out to me today. He wants to make a deal to return the money he embezzled in exchange for us not pressing criminal charges." "And what did you say?" "That it wasn't my decision but yours and the legal department's." Richard thought for a moment. "Barbara, schedule a meeting with our lawyers for tomorrow. We'll evaluate all our options before making any decision." "Of course. Oh, and Richard? Yes? I wanted to thank you for keeping your trust in me during the investigation. I know my position as CFO put me under suspicion. Barbara, you've always been an ethical professional. The fact that you didn't notice what Jeffrey was doing doesn't diminish your competence. He was very skilled at hiding irregularities. Still, I feel responsible for not catching the problems sooner. Use this experience to create even better controls in the future. That's how we grow from our mistakes." After hanging up, Richard went to check on Emma, who was sleeping peacefully in her crib. He stood there for a few minutes, watching his granddaughter, thinking about how much life had changed since Jennifer had come into their lives. The next day, the meeting with the lawyers confirmed that Jeffrey could face criminal charges for the embezzlement. However, there was also the possibility of a civil settlement if he returned the full amount and signed a confession. "What's your recommendation?" Richard asked the lawyers. "From a practical standpoint, a settlement may be more advantageous. You recover the money quickly and avoid years of litigation. And from a moral standpoint? That's a personal decision for you." Richard asked for time to think. That afternoon, while Jennifer watched Emma at the company playground, he shared the dilemma with her. "What would you do?" he asked. Jennifer considered carefully before answering. "I'd think about the long-term consequences. If you accept the deal, you're sending the message that fraud can be resolved simply by returning the money. That might encourage similar behavior in the future. But a criminal trial would be long and draining." "True, but it would also set a clear precedent that the company doesn't tolerate dishonesty, no matter the person's position." Richard watched Emma playing on the swing, seemingly without a care in the world. "You're right. I need to think about the kind of company I want to leave for her, and the kind of example you want to set for current and future employees." That night, Richard made his decision. He called the lawyers and instructed them to proceed with criminal charges against Jeffrey, rejecting any settlement offer. The decision had immediate repercussions in the company. Employees, who had been following the case with interest, realized that Richard was truly committed to integrity and transparency. Team morale visibly improved. 3 weeks later, Jeffrey was formally charged with embezzlement and corporate fraud. The case gained attention in the local media, positioning Thompson Construction as a company that would not tolerate internal corruption. "It was the right decision," Jennifer told Richard when they learned of the formal charges. "I hope so. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between justice and revenge. The difference is that justice aims to protect others from suffering the same harm. Revenge only seeks to punish the offender." Jennifer's wisdom continued to impress Richard. At 28, She displayed an emotional and ethical maturity that many senior executives lacked. The following months brought rapid growth for the company. The success of the Riverside project sparked interest from other states, and Thompson Construction began receiving invitations to participate in bids in Oregon and Washington. "We're growing faster than I expected," Richard said to Jennifer during one of their weekly strategy meetings. "Is that good or concerning?" she asked. "A bit of both. Rapid growth can compromise quality if not managed well." "Maybe it's time to consider expanding the executive team," Jennifer suggested. "Do you have someone in mind?" "Actually, yes. Remember when I mentioned some capable former colleagues from Anderson and Partners?" Richard nodded. "There's one person in particular who could add a lot of value here. Rachel Stewart. She's an expert in large-scale project management and has experience with government contracts." "Why would she leave where she is to come work here?" Jennifer smiled. "Because she was also a victim of David's questionable practices. Not in the same way I was, but she was sidelined for challenging some of his decisions. I know she's looking for an opportunity at a company with strong values." "Do you keep in touch with her?" "Yes. She's one of the few people there who believed my side of the story when everything happened." Richard considered the proposal. Expanding the team would be necessary to keep up with growth, and having Jennifer's recommendation gave him confidence in the professional's quality. "Set up a meeting with her. Let's talk." Rachel Stewart proved to be exactly as Jennifer had described: competent, ethical, and eager to work in an environment that valued professional integrity. She was hired as Director of Business Development and quickly integrated into the team. "Jennifer spoke very highly of you all," Rachel told Richard during her first week. "It's refreshing to work at a company where people genuinely care about each other." Rachel's arrival brought new energy to the company. She and Jennifer worked well together, creating synergies that benefited all projects. Richard watched with satisfaction as his company transformed into a collaborative and productive environment. Emma, now 3.5, was beginning to show interest in Grandpa's business. She often wandered the offices with Jennifer, greeting employees and observing meetings with childlike curiosity. "She's going to be a natural-born businesswoman," Rachel joked one day, after seeing Emma organize papers on Richard's desk with comical seriousness. "I hope she has choices," Richard replied. "I want her to follow her own dreams, not just inherit mine." "With the example you're setting, I'm sure she'll make good decisions," Jennifer said. A year after that memorable meeting, Thompson Construction had tripled its revenue and become a benchmark for social housing projects in the southern U.S. region. Richard was invited to speak at conferences on corporate social responsibility, always making sure to credit Jennifer as fundamental to the company's success. "Mr. Richard," Jennifer said one day while preparing Emma's afternoon snack, "can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, you know you can." "Do you miss Catherine?" The question caught Richard by surprise. They rarely spoke about Catherine directly. "Every day," he answered honestly. "But not in the painful way I used to." "What do you mean?" "Before, her absence was like a hole that sucked all my energy. Now the memory of her is like a light that guides me. I feel she would approve of the choices I'm making." Emma, who was playing on the floor, looked up when she heard the conversation. "Grandma Catherine is in heaven?" she asked with a child's innocence. Richard knelt beside his granddaughter. "Yes, sweetheart. She's watching over us from there." "Does she like Aunt Jennifer?" Emma asked. Richard looked at Jennifer, who was clearly moved by the question. "I'm sure she does," he replied. "She'd be very happy knowing someone so special is taking care of you and Grandpa." Emma smiled and went back to playing, satisfied with the answer. Richard and Jennifer stayed silent for a moment, both processing the profound simplicity of the child's question. "Jennifer," Richard finally said, "you know you've become part of this family in a way that goes far beyond work, don't you?" "I feel that," she answered, "and you've become the family I always wanted." The confession surprised Richard. "You don't have family." "I have parents, but our relationship is complicated. They never understood my career choices, especially my decision to work as a nanny after getting my business degree. And now they're starting to see I've found my path. The company's success has helped validate my decisions in their eyes." Richard felt a wave of paternal protectiveness toward Jennifer. She had given so much to his family. It was only fair he supported her in return. "If you'd like, I could talk to them someday. Explain how your contribution was key to the company's success." "That's not necessary," Jennifer said with a smile. "But I appreciate the offer. It means a lot to know I have your support." Emma walked up to them with a drawing she'd made. "Look," she said proudly. The drawing showed 3 stick figures: a tall man, clearly Richard, a woman, Jennifer, and a small child, herself. All were holding hands and smiling. "It's our family," Emma announced. Richard felt tears forming in his eyes. The simplicity of Emma's perception of their family unit touched something deep in his heart. "It's beautiful, Emma," Jennifer said, kneeling to the child's level. "Can I keep this drawing?" "Yes, it's for you and Grandpa." That night, Richard taped Emma's drawing to the refrigerator. It was the first personal decoration he'd put up anywhere in the house since Catherine's passing. The gesture symbolized his acceptance that life had moved forward, but in a good and meaningful way. The next morning, Richard arrived at the company with renewed energy. He had an important meeting with federal government representatives interested in expanding the Riverside model to other states. "Nervous?" Jennifer asked, entering his office with Emma, who carried a small toy briefcase. "Excited," Richard answered. "I haven't felt this confident about the company's future in a long time. And you have every reason to be. You've built something solid and meaningful." Emma walked up to Richard's desk and placed her toy briefcase next to his documents. "I help in meetings," she announced seriously. Richard laughed and picked her up. "Of course you help. You bring good luck to all our business ventures." The meeting with the government representatives was a complete success. They were impressed not just by the financial results of the projects, but by the measurable social impact the company had managed to create. "It's rare to find a construction firm that balances profit and social responsibility so well," remarked the federal program coordinator. "That's always been our goal," Richard replied. "We believe sustainable businesses are those that benefit everyone involved." After the meeting, Richard, Jennifer, and Emma celebrated with a special lunch. Emma insisted on choosing the restaurant, picking a diner with a playground. "Mr. Thompson," Jennifer said while Emma played, "can I make a suggestion about the new contracts? I always count on your ideas. What is it? How about creating a trainee program specifically for young people from the communities where we build, offering training and job opportunities to residents of the very projects we develop?" The idea excited Richard immediately. That would create a virtuous cycle. People would feel more connected to the projects, and we'd have a steady source of local talent. Exactly. And it would show our long-term commitment to the communities we serve. Emma came running back from the playground, thrilled. "Grandpa, Grandpa, I made a new friend. She said she wants to live in a pretty house like the ones you build." Richard looked at Jennifer, both touched by Emma's innocent remark. "And she will, sweetheart," Richard said, scooping his granddaughter into his arms. "We'll build lots of pretty houses for lots of families." "Can I help?" Emma asked. "Of course you can. You're already helping just by being here with us." On the way back to the office, Richard reflected on how much his life had changed. A year ago, he'd felt lost, questioning his leadership and struggling to balance family and work. Now he felt fulfilled in both, with a thriving company and a strong bond with his granddaughter. "Jennifer," he said, "you saved more than my company that day. You saved my confidence, my family, and my purpose." "You saved yourself," she replied. "I just showed you what was already there. Your integrity, your vision, your leadership. It was always there. But I needed someone to believe in me when I'd stopped believing in myself." Emma, dozing in her car seat, murmured something about pretty houses and Grandpa, making the two adults smile. "You know what amazes me most about this whole journey," Richard said. "What?" "How one person willing to do the right thing can completely turn a situation around. You could have stayed quiet in that meeting, could have told yourself it wasn't your problem." "But it was my problem," Jennifer corrected. "When you truly care about someone, their problems become yours too." The depth of Jennifer's dedication still amazed Richard. She'd turned a job into a personal mission to care for his family. When they arrived at the office, Rachel greeted them with more good news. 3 new contracts had been approved, securing work for the next 18 months. "We're officially booked solid," Rachel announced excitedly. "Great problem to have," Richard joked. "Speaking of good problems," Jennifer said, "we've been invited to the National Award for Corporate Social Responsibility. Thompson Construction has been nominated in the Community Impact category." Richard was genuinely surprised. "Who nominated us?" "The state government, based on the results of the Riverside project." Emma woke from her nap and immediately perked up at the adults' animated conversation. "Did we win an award?" she asked. "We've been nominated for an award," explained Jennifer. "We don't know yet if we'll win." "I know we will," declared Emma, with the absolute confidence typical of children. Richard laughed and picked her up. "If we win, it'll be thanks to special people like you and Aunt Jennifer." "And Grandpa too," added Emma, hugging his neck. That afternoon, as Jennifer took Emma to her activities at preschool, Richard stayed alone in his office reflecting on the journey of the past 12 months. He picked up the phone and called his younger brother David, who lived in New York. "Richard, what a wonderful surprise. How are things?" "Better than they've been in a long time," Richard answered honestly. "I heard the company is doing really well. Congratulations." "Thank you. David, actually, I called to tell you something personal." "I'm listening." Richard took a deep breath before continuing. "I've met someone very special who's been taking care of Emma and helping me with the company. She's become part of the family in a way I didn't expect." "That's wonderful, Richard. You deserve to be happy again." "It's not what you're thinking," Richard laughed. "She's young. She's Emma's nanny. But she's become like a daughter to me and a crucial presence in Emma's life." "Oh, I see. A kind of extended family." "Exactly. And I wanted to tell you because I finally feel like I'm honoring Catherine's memory in a positive way. Creating a loving, stable environment for Emma, but also moving forward with my life." "Catherine would be proud of you," David said warmly. "She always wanted you to be happy." "I know. And for the first time since she passed, I feel like I can be happy without guilt." After the conversation with his brother, Richard felt even more at peace with his choices. Sharing his happiness with someone close validated his feelings and confirmed he was on the right path. When Jennifer returned with Emma from preschool, she found Richard visibly more relaxed. "Did something good happen?" she asked. "I talked to my brother and told him about you both, about how important you've become to me." "And how did he react?" "He was happy. Said Catherine would be proud." Emma ran over to show Richard a drawing she'd made at school. It was a colorful house with a smiling family in front. "It's our new house," she explained. "When I grow up, I'll live in a house Grandpa built." Richard and Jennifer exchanged amused glances. "And who else will live in that house, huh?" Jennifer asked. "Grandpa, you, me, and all my toys," Emma replied with the flawless logic of a 3-year-old. "Sounds like a great plan," Richard said, hugging his granddaughter. That night, after putting Emma to bed, Richard and Jennifer stayed in the living room talking about plans for the company's future. "Jennifer, can I ask you something that might sound strange?" "Of course." "Do you plan to get married someday, have children of your own?" Jennifer smiled, unoffended by the personal question. "I do. When I find the right person and the right time." "And how would that affect your work here?" "Honestly, I don't know. It would depend on many factors, but I can promise there would always be a place in my life for you both. Emma has become like a daughter to me too." Richard felt relieved by her answer. "And I want you to know that when that time comes, we'll do everything we can to accommodate your family needs." "I appreciate that. But you know that hypothetical future is still far off, right? First, I need to find someone who understands and values the work I do here. Any smart man would recognize your dedication and qualities," Richard said. "I hope so. But for now, I'm very happy with the family I have," Jennifer replied, clearly referring to Richard and Emma. The following months brought new challenges and achievements. The company won the bid for 3 major housing projects in Oregon, officially expanding its operations beyond California. Rachel led the creation of a regional office in Portland, while Jennifer developed the community trainee program that became a model for other companies in the sector. The Corporate Social Responsibility Award was won, with Richard insisting on taking Jennifer and Emma to the award ceremony in Washington, D.C. "This award represents the work of a dedicated team," Richard said in his acceptance speech, "but especially of one person who taught us that professional competence and human warmth can coexist perfectly." Emma, watching from the audience in a special dress for the occasion, clapped enthusiastically when she heard her name mentioned in the speech. On the flight back to San Diego, Emma fell asleep between Richard and Jennifer, clutching the trophy Richard had let her carry. "It was a perfect day," Jennifer said softly. "It was the culmination of a perfect journey," Richard corrected. "Since that meeting 18 months ago, every day has confirmed we made the right decisions." "Do you think Emma will remember this day when she grows up?" "Maybe not the details, but she'll certainly remember the feeling. The pride, the togetherness, the sense of being surrounded by people who care about her." Jennifer adjusted Emma's position to make her more comfortable. "That's what matters most to me, that she grows up knowing she's loved and valued." "She'll grow up knowing much more than that," Richard said. "She'll learn that people can overcome adversity, that hard work is rewarded, that doing what's right is worth it, even when it's hard. Those are important lessons." "They're lessons you taught us," Richard replied. "Or rather, lessons you reminded us of. Sometimes we need someone from the outside to show us who we truly are inside." 2 hours later, they arrived home, exhausted but happy. Richard carried the sleeping Emma to her room, while Jennifer organized their travel belongings. "Jennifer," Richard said as she prepared to leave, "thank you for making this day possible. Thank you for giving me the chance to be part of it. You're not just part of it, you're at the center. Without you, none of this would have happened." Jennifer smiled, clearly moved by his words. "See you tomorrow, Mr. Richard." "See you tomorrow, Jennifer, and thank you and for everything." After Jennifer left, Richard stayed in Emma's room for a few minutes, watching his granddaughter sleep peacefully. The trophy sat on the nightstand, reflecting the soft glow of the lamp. Richard thought of Catherine and felt that, for the first time since her passing, he could imagine her smiling, not with sadness or longing, but with genuine pride for the man he'd become and the family he'd built. "Thank you," he whispered into the air, unsure whether he was thanking Catherine, Jennifer, or the fate that had placed such special people in his life. The next day, the company began a new chapter. With 3 major contracts underway and a solid, motivated team, Richard felt confident facing any challenges the future might bring. During the first meeting of the week, he announced a decision he'd been considering for weeks. "I've decided to create a profit-sharing fund for all employees. When the company thrives, everyone should thrive together." The team reacted with surprise and gratitude. Companies in the industry rarely offered real profit-sharing to operational staff. "Additionally," Richard continued, "we'll establish a continuing education program. The company will pay for training and specialization courses for any employee interested in professional development." Jennifer smiled proudly. These were exactly the kind of initiatives that characterized a company truly concerned with the well-being of its team. After the meeting, Rachel approached Richard. "These are courageous and generous decisions, but have you calculated the financial impact?" "I have. And even with these investments, our profit margin remains healthy. But more importantly, these are investments that will pay off with higher productivity, lower turnover, and better work quality." "Did you learn this from someone?" Rachel asked, glancing discreetly at Jennifer. "I learned by observing how treating people with dignity yields extraordinary result," Richard replied. That afternoon, while Emma played on the company playground, Richard and Jennifer talked about upcoming projects. "Mr. Richard, may I share an observation?" "Always." "You've changed a lot these past few months, not just as a businessman, but as a person. For the better, I hope. Definitely for the better. You've become more generous, more attentive to others' needs, more willing to listen to different perspectives." Richard reflected on Jennifer's words. "I think learning to be a grandfather taught me to be a better boss. The qualities needed are similar. patience, understanding, a genuine desire to see others grow and thrive. That's a beautiful analogy. Emma ran up to them, breathless from playing. "Grandpa, when I grow up, can I work at your company?" "If that's what you want," Richard replied. "But first, you'll study hard and discover your talents and passions. Like Aunt Jennifer did." "Exactly like Aunt Jennifer did." Emma nodded happily and ran back to play. Richard and Jennifer watched her interact with the other children who frequented the company playground. "She's learning important lessons about relationships and teamwork," Jennifer observed. "And she's growing up in an environment where she sees work can be a source of fulfillment and pride, not just an obligation. That's a precious gift you're giving her." Richard felt a wave of satisfaction. Raising Emma in a positive and stimulating environment was one of his greatest responsibilities as a grandfather. "Jennifer, can I confess something?" "Of course. Sometimes I worry if I'm preparing Emma properly for the real world, if I'm being too protective. You're giving her what every child needs: unconditional love, stability, and opportunities to grow. The rest she'll learn naturally." "Do you think Catherine would approve of how I'm raising her?" Jennifer looked Richard straight in the eyes before answering. "I'm certain she would. You're raising Emma with the same values Catherine cherished: kindness, integrity, generosity, and determination." Jennifer's words brought Richard peace. He knew he was doing his best, but external validation was comforting. End of story. Dear listeners, this story shows us how one person willing to do what's right can transform entire lives. Which moment touched you the most? Share your thoughts on family, work, and courage in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe.